The ambush and the unveiling of the trap. The air in the hearing room was thick with choreographed anticipation. Every lens on every camera was burning hot, focused on the figure of Adam Schiff. This was meant to be his moment of political apotheosis. A televised, surgical takedown of his most unpredictable, most dangerous critic, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. The narrative was pre-written, the headlines drafted, all waiting for the precise soundbite that would confirm Schiff's status as the righteous defender of democracy against internal subversion. Schiff, the self-appointed custodian of the nation's integrity, leaned in, his finger trembling with what appeared to be genuine moral outrage, or perhaps just meticulously rehearsed indignation, as he pointed directly at Gabbard. "You are Putin's puppet, Assad's mouthpiece, and a disgrace to this Congress." The words, sharp and lethal, cut through the nervous silence. Reporters in the gallery instinctively straightened, hands poised over keyboards, ready to transmit the viral confrontation. CNN's camera, fully zoomed, framed the congressman perfectly. Schiff had coordinated this scene for weeks, meticulously leaking his intended line of attack to friendly outlets, ensuring the entire global media would portray him as the necessary political executioner. What he failed to realize, however, was that he wasn't setting a trap, he had just swaggered into his own gilded cage. Tulsi Gabbard, a former combat veteran, offered no visible reaction, not a blink, not a twitch. She sat in a state of perfect stillness, her hands folded neatly on the table. To Schiff, conditioned by years of Washington's theatrical politics, her silence must have looked like fear, or perhaps the dazed shock of a politician facing career immolation. But to anyone who understood the language of the battlefield, that unnerving calm was the definitive warning flare before the strike. It was the poise of an individual entirely comfortable under pressure, distinguishing between genuine threat and mere political noise. Schiff, mistaking her composure for defeat, pressed his advantage, his voice rising, echoing confidently off the marble walls of the chamber. "This committee has tolerated your excuses for dictators long enough. Your trip to Syria, your refusal to call Assad a war criminal. These are not the actions of an American patriot." A pre-arranged, enthusiastic applause erupted from the gallery, a tactical chorus of young staffers and activists invited specifically to provide the necessary stage noise. Schiff permitted a fleeting, satisfied smile to cross his lips, soaking in the adulation. Yet, on the committee bench, a subtle but significant dissent was brewing. Allies shifted uncomfortably. Phones buzzed with internal commentary. The discomfort was palpable. The performance was too loud, too desperate. Tulsi waited patiently for the manufactured noise to subside. Then, with the same unflappable composure she'd shown under enemy fire in Iraq, she addressed the chairman. "Mr. Chairman, may I respond to these accusations?" Her voice, when it came, was calm, even, and devastatingly steady, a quiet authority that cut deeper than any shout could. "Thank you, sir," she nodded, then pivoted her attention back to Schiff, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Schiff speaks of patriotism. I've served this country in uniform for over 20 years. I've deployed to war zones while Mr. Schiff was manufacturing evidence in committee rooms." The gasp that rippled through the room was collective and involuntary. The bluntness of the comparison, a decorated veteran versus a political operative, was immediately destructive. Schiff's face flushed a deep, alarming red. "How dare you?" he hissed. "I'm not finished," she said quietly, her tone instantly restoring the silence. "You speak of Russia, another Russia hoax. Mr. Schiff, haven't we seen this movie before?" It was at this point that the script decisively broke from Schiff's meticulous plan. From her briefcase, she drew a single, thick manila folder, its label stark and unmistakable. Printed in thick black ink, "Schiff's Lies." The crowd murmured, the sound of their collective realization washing over the room. Schiff visibly froze. This was not merely outside his script, it was an act of audacious defiance that changed the entire dynamic. Tulsi leaned forward slightly, her quiet voice now amplified by the microphone into a declaration of war. "You wanted a public confrontation. Congressman, you're about to get one." With a controlled, deliberate motion, she opened the folder, slowly revealing the first document that would initiate his public reckoning. The hearing had just crossed an invisible threshold, from political performance to a televised investigation. The subsequent silence was heavy, the kind that precedes a major structural collapse. Tulsi Gabbard's hand, steady as an anchor, placed the document on the witness table. The faint seal of the FBI gleamed under the fluorescence. "Let's start," she said, her voice even, with something simple. "The FISA warrants." Schiff's chair creaked violently as he shifted, the first audible sign of his confidence fracturing. "Point of order." "There is no point of order," the chairman interrupted, his tone tired but firm. "You made the accusation, Mr. Schiff. Representative Gabbard may respond." Schiff hesitated, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Tulsi continued, turning a page highlighted in bright yellow toward the cameras. "This report," she said, documents 17 lies told to the FISA court. 17. Every one of them used to justify illegal surveillance against an American citizen. "And you." She looked directly at the increasingly frantic Schiff. "You knew about each one." The room became a cacophony of buzzing journalists, fingers flying over keyboards. The carefully constructed narrative had violently slipped from Schiff's grasp. "You have no right," Schiff managed, his voice now shaking with impotent rage. Tulsi's eyes met his, calm, steady, and entirely unforgiving. "I have every right, Congressman. You accused me of betraying my country. Now the American people deserve to know who's actually been lying to them." She lifted another paper, a printed email. "This is from your office. Sent to CNN's Jake Tapper. Quote, we need to take down Gabbard before she gains more influence. She's a threat to everything we've built." The words landed with the concussive force of an explosion. The chairman, his face now etched with concern, looked at Schiff. "Is that true?" Schiff's lips trembled. "That email. It's fabricated." Tulsi slid the header toward the clerk. "Timestamped? Verified. Your staff used government resources to coordinate a political hit job against a sitting member of Congress." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The Allied press row was now eerily silent. Republican Matt Gaetz leaned into his microphone, seizing the advantage. "Mr. Chairman," he said slowly, "I think this committee should see all of Representative Gabbard's evidence." The chairman paused, then nodded grimly. "Agreed." Tulsi closed the folder with a deliberate snap. "There's more," she said softly, "much more." Schiff, his composure evaporated, sweat gathering on his hairline, could only mutter, "You're grandstanding for the cameras." Tulsi offered a small, almost pitying smile. "No, Congressman, you are. You've built a career out of deception. You've destroyed lives to protect your narrative. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever." The narrative had been flipped. The hunter was now the prey. The Carter Page devastation, lies to the FISA court. The silence in the committee room had become oppressive, thick with the unacknowledged terror of Adam Schiff's crumbling narrative. Tulsi Gabbard, the decorated combat veteran, had seized the political battlefield from the career politician, replacing theatrical outrage with the cold, hard certainty of documented evidence. She turned toward the cameras, her voice resonating with a quiet authority that transcended the microphone. "The American people deserve honesty. They've been fed theater for too long. Today, they get the truth." She placed the next file on the table, a thicker envelope sealed with a genuine intelligence stamp, its presence undeniable. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is about Carter Page, the man whose life you helped destroy." Schiff physically recoiled, the color drained from his face. A visible, stark admission of the file's significance. The Carter Page saga, the alleged Russian agent whose surveillance formed the core of the Russiagate narrative, was the pillar upon which Schiff had built his entire national profile. Tulsi was not merely challenging his judgment, she was attacking the foundational integrity of his professional existence. Tulsi opened the file. "You called him a Russian agent on national television," she stated, her tone softening, becoming almost mournful in its condemnation. "But the documents show he was helping our own intelligence services. You knew that. You hid it." The chairman leaned forward, his face etched with gravity. "Is that true, Mr. Schiff?" Schiff could not, answer. Tulsi's voice sharpened slightly. "You accused patriots of treason while you traded in lies. And you called me a disgrace." She held up a photograph on the screen behind her. A young officer in dress whites. "Carter Page," smiling proudly. You destroyed this man's life. Congressman Schiff. You called him a Russian spy when you knew he was working with the CIA to stop Russian agents. Schiff finally spoke, his voice unsteady and brittle. The FISA court found probable cause. I followed the evidence. The evidence, Tulsi replied, flipping to a marked page in her file, was manufactured. You knew it was false. She cited the Inspector General's report. The Inspector General's report documents it all. 17 lies presented to the court. You had access to that information. You knew the truth and suppressed it. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of her accusation. Abuse of power against a fellow American citizen. The scene then escalated dramatically with the unexpected appearance of a true insider. From the back row, a man in a gray suit stood up, his voice rough and trembling with what sounded like both long-suppressed guilt and relief. My name is William Barnett, he said, FBI. I worked on the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Tulsi, seizing the crucial moment of the whistleblower's appearance, raised a hand to halt security. Let him speak. Barnett looked directly at Schiff, his gaze unwavering. We knew Carter Page was innocent. We knew the dossier was fake, but we were told to push forward anyway. Who told you? The chairman asked. The orders came from the top, Barnett revealed, from people who said Congressman Schiff wanted results. The gallery erupted in pandemonium. Schiff, his face now sickly pale, shot to his feet. This is outrageous. This is all staged. That man is a whistleblower. Mr. Schiff, Tulsi stated, her voice quiet but piercing through the noise. A real one, not the kind you coached for your own political games. She delivered the next fatal document, an email to James Comey. Dated January 2017. Quote, we need to maintain the Russian narrative at all costs. Page's collateral damage. Schiff slammed his hand on the table, his defense devolving into desperate denial. That's taken out of context. Then let's provide context, Tulsi said, sliding the rest of the chain toward the clerk. Comey's reply, understood. The objective justifies the means, and Schiff's response, Congressman. History will vindicate us when Trump is gone. The political implication was clear. The Russian collusion narrative was not an investigation, it was a political objective. A coordinated weaponization of intelligence to achieve a partisan outcome. The slow, public collapse of a man who thought himself untouchable was now complete. The coordination with fusion GPS and cover-ups. The echoes of the gavel, intended to restore order, were rendered moot. Adam Schiff sat motionless, a defeated silhouette, the master of narrative now trapped within his own catastrophic story. His decades-long cultivated image as a serious, principled figure was dissolving under the glare of the cameras, replaced by a look of terror. Tulsi Gabbard, utterly composed, began the third act of the reckoning. Let's talk about your meetings. Mr. Schiff, she said evenly, the ones you told the American people never happened. Schiff's head lifted, his eyes darting toward her with a look of pure, unadulterated dread. The subject, the shadowy firm Fusion GPS, the architects of the infamous, discredited Steele dossier. 2 weeks before the first FISA warrant was submitted, Tulsi continued, her voice clinical in its precision. You met privately at the Standard Hotel with individuals connected to Fusion GPS. The same firm that produced the fake dossier used to justify illegal surveillance. The committee murmured in disbelief. Tulsi held up the proof. A grainy but unmistakable photograph, Schiff, seated across from Glenn Simpson, the founder of Fusion GPS, complete with a damning date and time stamp. That's a lie, Schiff blurted, his voice cracking mid-sentence. That photograph is doctored. Tulsi's calm smile didn't waver. The metadata doesn't lie, and neither do the records of your office that place you at the same location at the same time. You weren't investigating Russian interference, Mr. Schiff. You were coordinating it. The accusation was the most severe yet. Schiff was not merely misled by intelligence, he was allegedly a co-conspirator in manufacturing the very narrative he championed. The coordination efforts extended beyond the shadows of the hotel room. You told this committee and the American people that you'd seen evidence of collusion. Tulsi stated, her tone rising in moral volume. Evidence that justified years of division and mistrust in this country. So I'll ask again, where is it? Schiff's lips moved, but no words came out. His aide, pale and visibly panicked, whispered urgently, but Schiff simply shook his head, paralyzed by the moment. Jim Jordan, sensing the historical weight of the exchange, leaned in. We've reviewed every classified transcript, every briefing, every interview. There was never any evidence. You lied to the American people for 3 years straight. Tulsi turned another page, revealing an internal FBI memo from Peter Strzok to Andrew McCabe, dated March 2017, referencing a meeting with Schiff to coordinate targeting information on Trump associates. The FBI already did. Tulsi replied softly to Schiff's predictable denial. And now it's public. A reporter shouted the question that was on every mind. Congresswoman Gabbard, are you accusing Representative Schiff of criminal conspiracy? Tulsi locked eyes with the camera, ensuring her answer was recorded for history. I'm not accusing. I'm presenting facts. The rest is for the Justice Department to decide. Schiff's final, desperate attempt at deflection, claiming she was twisting classified material, was instantly neutralized. Nothing I've shown, Tulsi interrupted, her voice gaining its final, steel-like edge, is classified. Every piece was properly declassified or came from public sources. You should know the difference. Congressman, you've spent years pretending to. His posture defeated, his eyes glazed with disbelief. Schiff was utterly dismantled. Tulsi, gathering her papers, delivered the closing judgment on this chapter. Patriotism isn't destroying lives for headlines. It's telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially then. The chairman, shattered, sought to regain some footing. Representative Gabbard, he said slowly, you mentioned more evidence. Tulsi met his eyes. Yes, Mr. Chairman, the Russia hoax was only one chapter. The next involves the Ukraine whistleblower. The entire room froze again. The slow collapse of the Russia narrative was now to be followed by the explosive reveal of the foundational deceit behind the subsequent impeachment effort. The air left the room. Tulsi reached for a new manila envelope marked, Security Footage, HPSCI. The Ukraine whistleblower perjury trap. The manila envelope, marked, Security Footage, HPSCI, House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, sat on the table like a live bomb. Its contents were far more damning than any email or memo. They were unedited. Archived evidence of physical presence and coordination. Schiff's eyes locked onto the folder. And the last vestiges of his political mask dissolved, replaced by stark, undisguised terror. Tulsi Gabbard, her voice quiet and clinical, delivered the opening salvo. Mr. Schiff, you swore you never met him. That was a lie. She slid a still image from the envelope. September 9, 2019, she stated, your schedule listed you in a constituent meeting in California. But this, she tapped the photo lightly, shows you right here inside this very building. In a closed office on the 3rd floor. Meeting with the man you later called the anonymous whistleblower. Gasps swept through the gallery. Schiff, clinging desperately to denial, shouted, that's not me. That's doctored. Tulsi countered with the unforgiving logic of digital forensics. She placed a second photo beside the first, same day. Different angle. Timestamp within minutes. Multiple cameras. Congressman. Multiple angles. All archived by House security. You weren't in California that day. You were here preparing your case. The implication was not merely misstatement, it was premeditated perjury. You said you'd never met him. Tulsi interrupted softly. You said under oath that you had no direct contact before the hearing. That statement alone is perjury. The room erupted, but Tulsi pressed the advantage, laying down a printed transcript. This is an internal message between your staffers 2 days before the whistleblower complaint was filed. We've coordinated the statement with the source, it reads. The chairman wants it timed for maximum media impact. Matt Gaetz leaned into his mic, summarizing the undeniable truth. Timed for maximum media impact. Mr. Chairman, that sounds an awful lot like political staging. Tulsi confirmed the analysis. Exactly. This wasn't oversight. It was choreography. The so-called whistleblower didn't expose corruption. He followed instructions. Schiff stood abruptly, his voice high-pitched and desperate. This is outrageous. You're turning this hearing into a circus. He ranted about stolen documents. But Tulsi cut him off with quiet thunder. Everything I'm presenting was lawfully declassified. It's not my fault you didn't expect the truth to make it out. She lifted the final photo. A still frame showing Schiff shaking hands with the whistleblower. This, she said softly, isn't journalism or patriotism, it's betrayal. Schiff sank back into his chair, staring down at his own trembling hands. Completely broken. Tulsi gathered the evidence, her tone measured but devastating. The American people have been lied to for too long. They deserve to see how easily their trust was traded for airtime. The chairman, exhausted, sought to conclude the chapter. Representative Gabbard, he said slowly, does this conclude your evidence on the whistleblower? Tulsi looked directly into the camera lens. The one broadcasting live. Not quite, Mr. Chairman. She placed one more folder on the table. Thinner, darker, demanding attention. Because what connects all of this isn't just deceit. It's money. Every eye in the room followed her hand to the new folder. The foreign funding behind these operations. The coordinated leaks. The planted stories. Traces back to the same network of interests that shaped the entire narrative. And Mr. Schiff was right in the middle of it. The stakes had just been raised again. From perjury and abuse of power to foreign corruption and the potential selling of influence. The foreign funding trail and Burisma connections. The committee reconvened with Adam Schiff, visibly disheveled and late, returning to his empty seat, an immediate visual symbol of his isolation and disgrace. Tulsi Gabbard, utterly composed, reached for the folder marked Financial Records, Foreign Interests. The final, devastating motive behind the years of deceit was about to be laid bare. We've talked about lies, about secret meetings, and about coordination with the media. Tulsi began. Now, let's talk about motive. She laid out printed bank records and transaction reports. Entries highlighted in bold. These documents show a pattern. She stated, a pattern of foreign money routed through consulting firms and policy groups linked directly to Mr. Schiff's campaign operations. Schiff managed a flicker of defiance. That's absurd. I've never accepted foreign money. Not directly, but through intermediaries, Tulsi corrected, her voice the calm certainty of forensic accounting. She pointed to the first highlighted transaction. Between 2017 and 2020, your campaign received contributions from 3 political action committees. Those PACs were funded by a lobbying firm called Global Strategies LLC, the same firm that has contracts with the Ukrainian energy company. Burisma. A fresh wave of gasps rippled through the audience. The connection was clear. The money trail linked the man leading the impeachment charge against the president over Ukraine corruption directly to the very sources of alleged corruption in Ukraine. Tulsi continued, her tone relentless. The same company that appeared repeatedly in your private communications with certain intelligence contacts. Those emails are part of the congressional record now. They show coordination on media strategy regarding the so-called Ukraine whistleblower. This is conspiracy nonsense. Schiff snapped, trying to delegitimize the evidence. You're twisting routine donations into some paranoid fantasy. Routine donations don't come in $400 increments from shell companies that disappear 6 months later. Tulsi countered, her voice low and cutting. She produced another document, a memo from your staff dated February 2020. It discusses maintaining strategic relationships with European partners for the purpose of funding public messaging. Mr. Schiff, those European partners weren't governments. They were private contractors connected to foreign intelligence services. She held up the most damning piece of all, an email. Translated and verified. This is an email from one of those same contractors, thanking your office for ensuring continued access to U.S. intelligence briefings in exchange for, quote, communications assistance. That's not oversight. That's a breach of national trust. The chairman leaned forward, his voice a low tremor. Congresswoman, are you suggesting Representative Schiff shared sensitive information with foreign-linked entities? Tulsi's answer was an execution. I'm not suggesting. I'm confirming. Schiff's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table. Every leak, every selective disclosure to the press, Tulsi said, her tone final, wasn't about transparency. It was about control, about influence, about keeping certain voices in power while silencing others. Matt Gaetz confirmed the grave shift in the proceedings. Mr. Chairman, I think the record should reflect that we're no longer discussing politics. We're discussing potential national security violations. Tulsi stacked her documents neatly. Mr. Schiff, you accused me of being compromised by foreign interests. But the evidence shows that while I was serving under fire overseas, you were selling influence here at home. She placed a final, thinner folder on the table, marked, Standard Hotel Incident, ensuring the media could register its existence. Before we move on, she said, there's one more thing the American people deserve to understand. The story about that hotel isn't gossip. It's evidence, and it connects everything. The final betrayal, leaking classified material for headlines. The final act of the political reckoning was introduced with a single, chilling word stamped across the first page of the folder, confidential report. The file detailed the Standard Hotel incident, the meeting with Fusion GPS that Schiff had vehemently denied. On March 17, 2018, Tulsi began, her voice low and deliberate. You attended a private meeting at the Standard Hotel in Los Angeles. You've denied that meeting under oath. That's because it never happened, Schiff shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. Except that it did, Tulsi countered, presenting the undeniable proof. Hotel security logs show your name, your security details arrival, and your room access that evening. Those records were obtained lawfully with full declassification approval. The key to the final betrayal was in the details. Tulsi lifted a communication log transcript. 9:47 p.m. call placed from Suite 811. Registered under a staff alias. To Glenn Simpson's office in Washington, D.C. Content summary. Confirming delivery of documents. Schiff froze, his face utterly blank. Those documents, Tulsi said, her voice dropping to an accusatory whisper, were internal committee materials, drafts of intelligence briefings not yet made public, materials that within 24 hours appeared in leaked press reports citing anonymous committee sources. The chairman's eyes darkened. Mr. Schiff, is that true? Schiff's silence was the only answer. Tulsi leaned forward slightly, her voice imbued with a quiet, powerful rage. You accused me of being a traitor to my country. But it seems the person leaking classified information from within the Intelligence Committee wasn't the woman who served in Iraq. It was the man using hotel rooms to pass off documents. She connected the dots with devastating simplicity. I faced enemies on battlefields. Mr. Schiff, I've watched people fall while defending their country. What you did, trading classified material for headlines, isn't politics. It's betrayal. Schiff muttered a weak defense. You can't prove intent. Intent doesn't matter when the evidence shows the act, Tulsi replied. She held up an FBI communication summary documenting coordination between Schiff's office and a DC-based journalist, confirming the receipt of the leaked documents. The metadata matches the files stored on your committee server. Jim Jordan summarized the indictment. Mr. Chairman, these findings suggest direct misuse of classified intelligence by a sitting member of Congress. Tulsi lowered her papers and spoke softly, almost kindly, her voice laced with finality. You tried to weaponize truth. Adam, you turned it into theater. You thought the American people would never see behind the curtain. But now they do. Schiff finally looked up, his eyes glassy, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't understand the pressure. The threats. Tulsi cut him off gently. I understand perfectly. I've seen what people do when they're afraid of losing power. They call it duty. They call it patriotism, but it's really just fear. The chairman's gavel struck once, sounding like mercy, not order. A brief recess was called. Schiff slumped forward, his shoulders shaking, as aides quietly gathered around him. Tulsi Gabbard, unflinching and resolute, simply sat back. She had exposed the political rot, moving from accusations of being a puppet to the presentation of documented perjury, foreign corruption, and the calculated treason of a committee chairman. The aftermath and political reckoning. The final moments of the hearing were less about political debate and more about the clinical observation of a career ending. The recess was a mere formality, giving the media time to process the sheer weight of the revelations. 17 documented lies to the FISA court. Coordination of political hits using government resources. perjury regarding the Ukraine whistleblower, and a direct financial trail linking campaign funds to Burisma-connected foreign lobbying. All compounded by the use of classified material for personal political gain. As the room slowly emptied, the questions were not for Tulsi, but for the defeated figure of Adam Schiff. The final unspoken verdict had been delivered by the evidence itself. One reporter whispered the question on everyone's mind: if this is what she's revealed so far, what's in the next folder? Tulsi Gabbard glanced down at her table. There were still 2 unopened folders left. One marked, Foreign Leverage, and the other marked, Internal Ethics Investigation, Confidential. The implication was clear. The exposure of Schiff was not a one-off attack, but the first layer of a much deeper, systemic rot that connected the entire DC political establishment. The spectacle demonstrated the core fragility of the modern political narrative. Schiff had operated for years protected by the dual shield of media complicity and the power of the Intelligence Committee, believing he could label any dissent as disinformation or foreign propaganda. Tulsi, however, brought a unique and necessary weapon to the fight: the courage of a combat veteran who knew the difference between political performance and existential threat, and the discipline to leverage declassified facts against theatrical outrage. This wasn't just a political victory, it was a paradigm shift. It signaled to Washington that the era of using national security as an unassailable weapon against political opponents had come to a devastating end. The narrative was over. The facts had prevailed. The final, lasting image was not the sound of the gavel, but the sight of Adam Schiff, once the most powerful committee chairman in Washington, slumped in his chair, staring at the floor, utterly isolated. Tulsi Gabbard, the woman he had attempted to brand a traitor, stood tall and calm, a testament to the enduring power of truth when wielded with precision and courage. The establishment had tried to conduct an ambush, but they had walked directly into their own tribunal.